Today, we're talking all about current and how most anglers use it wrong, and that's hurting your fishing. We're going to talk about the different types of current because there are several different types and how you should be fishing each separate type. Stick around. We're going to talk all about it. Come on, get it. Got him. Oh, he's not a bad one. Oh, he's not a bad fish. Come on, you. Oh, that's a good fish. And he went after it. Look at that. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And today we're talking all about current. We're told that it's one of the most important aspects of bass fishing. We need it to get those bass fired up and get them biting. But for a lot of anglers, it's nothing but a hassle, a constant source of frustration. You'd rather fish a slick, calm day because it's just easier for you. You may not get as many bites, but the fishing is a lot easier to manage. However, most anglers don't understand that there are different types of currents. And today we're talking about 4 distinct different types of current and how they impact a fishery and how in turn that impacts the bass and how we need to be fishing for them. But before we get started, if you like what I do here, click that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, give this video a like. I would really appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, head on over to patreon.com and check out my members page. It's a place where I do videos and polls that I don't do here on YouTube. For example, you might be noticing subtle changes in my boat from video to video. That's because I put polls about the new steering wheel, the new seat cushions, or whatever that I'm going to put on my boat as I'm restoring it, and I let the Patreon members vote on what I put on there, including if I'm even going to add forward-facing sonar to that boat. Whatever the poll says, that's what I'm going to do. So if you want to be a part of that, you want to check that out, head on over to patreon.com and check out my members page. But we're talking about different types of current today. And a lot of anglers don't understand that the current matters. Even if there is no current, it matters. It matters how those bass behave, and it matters how they set up. And there are definitely different types of current, not just in the source that they come from, but how they move through the water and how those bass react to it. The first source that we are most common with, we just think of water flowing down a hill, right? That actually has a term. In engineering parlance, that's called hydraulic gradient. A fluid, hydraulic, gradient, a change. So a fluid change. That's all it is. And we think of it, as water flowing down a hill. River systems are a hydraulic gradient type of current. When a dam opens its spillway onto a major reservoir or whatever, like a TVA lake or what have you, and that water starts flowing throughout the entire fishery, that's a hydraulic gradient. It greatly impacts the entire fishery in one direction. It's going to be flowing from A to B, and the entire fishery will be impacted. Less so on the banks, more out in the middle as that fluid flows down as it funnels down. Now, you ask anyone who likes fishing a river system, especially a fast-moving river system for something like a smallmouth bass. Smallies love current. They love hiding out in those eddies, and they love getting behind the rocks and behind the stumps and just darting out in the middle of that current to get their prey. It's a very specific type of fishing. The stronger the current, the more you have to react to it. And something like a hydraulic gradient, it's a fishery-wide phenomenon. It affects the entire fishery. You're not going to get away from gravity, and even when you open that spillway, it's going to change the entire fishing. Now, for a lot of those types of things, I'm fishing spot lures, right? Sometimes I'll take a wacky rig and I'll let it bounce down the rocks. And that's a great way to get fish. It's a lot like trout fishing, right? When you're trout fishing and you've got your waders on and you're flicking your bait out there, you've got like trout nuggets or what have you, you notice that it just bounces as it goes. Well, in a strong type of current, I will do something very, very similar. I will use something like a weightless worm or a lizard or some sort of soft plastic, and I just let it go carry down the current. And it doesn't matter if it's heavy current, like if I'm fishing the Mississippi River, or if it's a lighter current. It's like if I'm fishing like the back pocket of something and it's got that flowage moving across. Now, if I'm fishing deeper holes in that current, or if I'm fishing pockets within that current, then I'm going to go to something like a jig. But again, I'm fishing more along the bottom because there's nutrients being stirred up in the entire water column from the bottom all the way to the top. And something like a jig, especially if you have a lot of structure, you have a lot of cover through there. You've got some gravel beds, you've got riprap banks, you've got laydowns. A jig, you can work through that bottom pretty easily. Now, you can either keep it in place and try to work those eddies like I often do, or work it like a traditional jig and bring it back to you. But in deep current areas, that's something that I like to use a lot. Again, float it down with a wacky rig, or work a finesse style along those current seams, let the current have its way with your bait, or I will use something like a heavier weighted jig and work specific spots in those current. Now, the second type of current that we're most familiar with, wind blown. And that's the one that most people really don't understand. They're thinking wind blown current day to day whenever they're heading out to their favorite fishery. But when we look at the weather app, or we look at the fishing app, and we see that the wind is blowing out of the southwest and it's headed this way, and we see the windward side and we see the leeward side. But what we're not understanding, again, is that current is air movement, and air is a fluid. It responds very much like a liquid does. So when it's going across that area, when it's going across your fishery, if it has obstacles, like say it's an impounded river, right? Say it's like Chickamauga or Pickwick or Gunnersville or any of these types of TVA lakes, then it's going to be very long and winding. It's going to have several branches. Wind doesn't flow in a straight line. Wind will find those paths of least resistance and go through there. A lot of times our weather apps and our fishing apps fail to take that into consideration. Whenever that wind hits the far bank, it doesn't stop. Think about it. When you're driving in your car, does the wind stop in the front of your vehicle? No, it kind of spreads and flows around you. You have to take that into consideration so that the current out in the middle may be going in a completely different direction than what's happening near the bank. And a good example of this is in my little plastic boat, and I'm doing this even in my new nitro boat, I will float along with the current. I don't use the trolling motor, I just float along with the current very slowly. And I will get pushed toward one bank or the other depending on how the wind is blowing. But when I get close to that bank, as I get closer to it, I don't brush up into the bank. No, I go upwards. That current carries me because it hits that and it has a buffer and it just kind of keeps moving me along. So rather than blowing off out into the trees, the wind actually hits that side and separates. Some may go more one way, some may go less the other way, depending on the angle that it's hitting. And you can think about that, right? That makes a lot of sense. That's why even though the wind may be blowing out of the southwest, right, it might actually be blowing to the north on the current, right? The current may actually be blowing to the north or to the south or whatever, depending upon the angle that bank is compared to how the wind is hitting it. But we don't think about that. And like I said, a lot of apps and a lot of other things don't take that into consideration. You have to think of current as dynamic. You have to think of fluids. The water and the wind are dynamic, and you have to understand how they mix together. It's not just straight across and stop or straight across and keep going. That current will bend and go up. That's why I can work that current all the way up and go to its source. As I've said many, many times, the main thing when I'm doing wind-blown current or wind-driven current is I always want to follow it to its source. Or rather, I want to follow it to the end. I want to get along that bank and I want to follow it all the way to the end because that's actually where all the nutrients are going to be blown to. If I'm getting blown in that direction, if I'm getting blown to that spot, everything else is getting blown to that spot too. And that technique has proven so successful for me time and time and time again. It doesn't matter if you're on a natural bowl lake in Minnesota or if you're on the gnarliest, nastiest, twisty, knottiest lake or bayou in Louisiana. It's the same thing. That current is going to be bending around and it will take you where you want to go. And where that current ends up, that's where all the good stuff is going to be. Now, the next thing that a lot of anglers don't think of, and this is one of them that anglers just really never even considered. Wind doesn't instantly change the direction of the water. The more water you have, the longer it's going to take that wind to impact it, especially if it's already flowing in one direction. So you need to consider that too. Just because the wind is blowing out of the west right now and it blows out of the north later, you got to give it a while. All that water is heavy and all of it has a lot of momentum, and it's going to take a while, a few hours or even longer, before it adjusts accordingly. Which brings me to my third type of current, and this is one anglers never even think about, and that is the backwards current. Again, let's say you have a westward wind blowing on your fishery all day long, or for a couple of days. All the water gets moved from one side of the lake to the other. Well, not all of it, but a large portion of it. The water on the eastern side of the lake, away from when the wind's coming from, is actually going to be deeper. And depending on how strong that wind was blowing and how long it was blowing, it can be several inches or more deeper. When that wind stops or changes direction, that water is going to be going back, which creates a different type of current. Now, it's not as strong as wind-driven current or hydraulic gradient, but it's a current nonetheless as that current comes back. And you'll fish it the same exact way. And for currents like that, whenever we have wind-driven current, we've got a lot of chop on the water, we've got a lot of movement on the water. Obviously, good old spinnerbait, right? Riding that current down the bank, whether it's going one way or the other, good old current-driven spinnerbait bite is hard to beat. Something like squarebill. We've had a lot of current on the big lake lately. In the late summer, we start getting a lot more wind. It actually starts to drive a lot of that wind-borne current. We have a lot of other different types of currents. And that's why I'm fishing the squarebills. That's why that crankbait bite you've heard me talk about so much is really starting to kick in. As a matter of fact, well, I actually finally learned my lesson when it comes to fishing these through the hydrilla. Check this out. And it kind of buried. See, like that, and that's more hydrilla. But I'm not taking that chance. Last time we were fishing through this very same spot, what happened? Yeah, I threw off a nice fish. I shook it off, yes. Let's not do that again. And that was the second time I'd done that in as many days. I did the same classical leader. That's a fish. Oh, and I got him. I got you. I work so hard, you tiny little thing, but I work so hard for you. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Woohoo! Pound? Not quite a pound. Yeah, but I'm seeing a bunch in this area. All right. Thank you, little dude. Appreciate it. Let's see if we can't do that one more time. So a lowbrow didn't shake one off for once. Sure, it was a dink, but I didn't shake it off. I thought it was hydrilla, but I kept reeling with it, and eventually I got that fish in the boat. But again, spinner baits, moving baits through that current near the bank. That's what I'm using. That's what I'm always having success with. So if you have current moving by the bank, that's wind driven or that backflow current, I'm telling you, something like a spinner bait, something like a spy bait, something like a swim bait, some type of moving bait. For me, I like spinner baits and I like those square bill crankbaits. Those will work great for me. But try a moving bait. I'm telling you, you're going to have a lot of success with those. Even if you're from the bank, right? You can throw a good swim bait from the bank, a little soft paddle tail, and they work exceptionally well. Now, the last type of current we're talking about is sun-made current. And the sun has an impact on the entire planet. It's just the way it is. The sun is the biggest thing in our area by a lot. 99% of all the matter in the entire solar system is in the sun. The raging nuclear furnace full of hot ionized gas and plasma. So our little ball of rock and mud is definitely under the influence of the sun. So the atmosphere is dynamic, and as a result, that water is dynamic as the sun beats down on that water. It causes the top layer of the water to heat up, which will cause it to move and flow, and then come down and curl and mix down. So you'll get a mixing action. A lot of times this will actually result in a thermocline. This is where the thermocline comes from, because you'll get that warmer air, that warmer water on the top layer because it's being heated by the sun. And it actually has a current to it because it's moving, because it's more energetic. Remember, heat is just energy. We interpret it as heat, but it's actually energy. Heat is energy. The more energy something it has, the more it's going to move. The less energy it has, the less it's going to move. That's why that top layer of water, whenever you've had a lot of sunny days, is going to be moving and flowing a little bit. And, you know, if you're a bank fisherman and you're using a bobber, right, you're slip corking, you're using a bobber, and you can see, even on slick, calm days, that bobber doesn't stay exactly where it's at if that sun is out, because that sun is driving current. And a lot of times you're going to be fishing higher up in the water column. You might be fishing top water. You might be fishing wake baits, but whatever it is, you want to stay in that higher part of the water column, because that's where the food's going to be. That's where the baits fish are going to be. And that's where the bass are going to be. So again, you can see different types of current require different types of strategies. There is no one size fits all. You have to use what works, and you have to take into account the weather, the fishery that you're on, and how that current's going to be reacting, how the fishery is going to be reacting to those outside conditions. Current's just a reaction. That's all it is. Current is a reaction to stimulus. Whether it's wind, whether it's sun, whether it's gravity, it's a reaction. And how you take advantage of that reaction really can improve how many fish you catch. So there you have it. Way more about current than you ever thought you wanted to know. But each type of current causes the fishery to set up differently, which in turn causes those bass to set up differently. Once you identify the different types of currents and start fishing them in the appropriate way, I'm telling you, you will catch way more fish, and current will become you a friend rather than just a hassle. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.